Welcome to a very merry, mediatized holiday reflection on performance studies brought to you by Bianca Gordon. Welcome! I'm going to be reflecting on a semester in performance studies and what I learned. The first 3 weeks of the semester we spent answering this question: what is performance studies? And to address that, we studied this gentleman, Richard Schechner, and I really agree with his thoughts about performance studies that we have objects, anything around us, any person, any table can be an object that is doing something. A person might be talking, a table might be standing, and that behavior is a performance. And when we go and we say, what is that table doing? And what does it mean that that table or that person is standing or talking with that behavior? When we study that, when we look at that, that's performance studies. And so Schechner encouraged us to ask performance type questions in order to analyze different things as performance, to ask what space is this taking place in? What costume might this object be wearing? Who's directing their actions? Is there choreography involved? But really to look at behavior with a performance lens, you ask performance studies questions of that behavior. So that was the first 3 weeks that we spent in performance studies, trying to unpack what is performance. After that initial introduction to performance studies, I had to hone in my perspective a little bit because I knew I was interested in looking at how is a violence performed in theater and in the world around us. And I have to say, there was a lot of tragic and violent events going on in the news. ISIS beheading of Peter Kessig, multiple school shootings across the country, and even today the CIA is releasing a torture report. And so the relevance of this topic, this question, how is violence performed, is still ongoing for me. And so for weeks 4 through 6, we looked at the archive, ritual, and play were the topics that we dived into. And I was really impacted by scholar Rebecca Schneider and her thought that the archive could give us a sense of bones or a skeleton, but the performance itself is the flesh, if we were thinking of the archive and performance as one whole body together. And for me, that's important, thinking about violence as what is the underlying skeleton? How are we capturing this in the news around us, in film and photography? But flesh, the actual performance of violence upon flesh, is something that we need to consider in how that impacts people, especially the victims of who violence is being performed upon. So for weeks 7 through 9, we looked at performativity, gender, critical race theory. I was really captivated by J.L. Austin and the idea that words do something, that to declare war might do something. And as a Shakespeare scholar, I'm especially interested in looking at his language. What does that do to people? How does language perform on an audience? We also looked at the role of the object, which I'm still marinating on how I'm going to use that in my scholarship. And then I'll get into what really lit me up. So for week 10, we started talking about globalized and multicultural performance. And this is where Schechner started to really intersect my interests, looking at September 11th as a performance of violence that was really geared towards an audience. So moving on from the study of globalization and globalized performance, I was really excited when we started talking about the body in performance, and especially performance studies scholar Andre Lepecki and his conception of corporeality, which I'll use my script to define. He defines as understanding the body as a multiplicity, an assemblage of, and deeply enmeshed in the real. And he also defines the body as not natural or absolute or a given, but as a tangible and substantial category of cultural experience. And so I'm really excited to dig deeper with the body in the performance of violence and how the body is both something that is enduring and tangible, but also is affected by cultural experience and how different cultures are treating the performance of violence. Also, I'm excited as we move into mediatized uh, performances and looking at how does the performance of violence in theater maybe affect, impact, do something different to an audience than what mediatized um, performance will does to an audience when we see a news story on the internet or on the TV, on our phones of someone being tortured or beheaded across the world. Is that different than when it happens in a theater space right in front of us? Might we be impacted by that, and might it do something different to us in that space? So another set of performance studies thinkers that I'm really excited about live in this text, and I agree with their conception of performance studies, their conception of why we need to study performance, um, the performance of violence. These scholars argue that performance studies scholars are ethically obligated to study violence and the performance of violence. Yeah, I'm so grateful for the doors that performance studies has opened up for me, studying violence, the performance of violence, and I'm really excited moving forward. Thanks for sticking it out with me in this holiday special, and we'll see you next semester.